everyone kind of got thrust into this. It might have been an option or something that certain people did once or twice a week, or, you know, one or two people did. But in general, up until the past couple of weeks, everybody drove into the office and worked. Now, when you throw some fun statistics behind things, which is about 43% of the workforce was doing some form of telecommuting prior to last week, and 80 to 90% of everyone that was in the workforce usually says that they would like the option to work from home at some of the time. So I personally think that there's a big culture shift that is going to be happening with people, now that we know we can work from home, kind of justifying the idea of going back into the office. Now, obviously, you know, working in the office is great. Organic communication is one of the best things about it. Things are more efficient, but knowing that it can be done, I think, is going to change stuff. So having a formal policy of how you can work remotely or whatever will not only be more inclusive for your business, because now we can include people that are, you know, stuck at home, or individuals that have, you know, that are seniors, that are older, that may have mobility issues. A lot of different people can come in now that we know that remote access can work. So when you want to create a policy for it, first thing we want to do in the normal part for this, safety first, right? You know, if you haven't moved everybody to your office, I still got people that are only working from Mondays and Fridays, but are still bringing into their, you know, you got to support them if they're feeling ill or symptoms, to give them the option to work from home, right? Work can still happen because we are in professional services and in education services. We just got to give them the option, right? If you have anybody that's ill, or even if you're not, it's just kind of a good idea to perform a thorough office cleaning somehow, and then figure out how you can make that a routine task. You know, maybe if you have a place that already comes and cleans for you, you know, maybe once a quarter they do a more thorough cleaning or something for you. Most of the times when significant changes happen in our culture or significant threats, it changes our life, you know, not just in the temporary, but for the longer term. So just trying to think long term on that. Then, of course, you know, stay up with the CDC recommendations for it. So assess your possibilities. These are the discussion questions. And I got a lot of these discussion questions from the Constant Contact Plan for Small Business action plan on there. So if you download that, which it'll come with the templates that I'll send out today, and it'll also be a separate attachment. Some of these questions will already be on there, but I wanted to take some time, and maybe Jen, you and I can kind of do this or whatever. So when you have, you know, systems that are allowed to work, how are you going to do that? You know, is it applications based? Is it policies? Are you going to offer home office support? Are you going to make people use their own laptops, or are you going to send them home with the computer workstation that they have at the office? Are you going to buy them new laptops or whatever? Again, we've got, you know, what's going on now, what's going on later. Right now, if you had to get information out to everybody, how would you do it? Could you have an all hands meeting right now with where your staff is? You know, do you have a Zoom account that you could bring everybody in? Do you have a conference call that can handle, you know, 5, 10, 20 people at a time? And then start thinking about short term, what are the things that are going to change? What if you become short on staff? What if all of a sudden you have no legal secretaries or paralegals or tax preparers right now because everybody is out sick with something that's going on? What could happen there? How would you fill up for it? How would you adjust your deadlines? How would you communicate to your clients and keep your projects and your other deadlines on track? What if the owners become ill? Who's going to sign checks? Do you have checks? If you do need to temporarily close for whatever reason, can you handle that? And do you have a plan for what decisions you will reopen under, what it's going to be contingent on? Is that closure plan sustainable, right? If you needed to close, how long could you be closed, still paying your employees, still having essential services like bills getting paid for? You know, how long is that going to happen? What resources are available for you right now as a small business for your continuity and your cash flow options? We put a post up on our blog that talks about the CARE Act that was passed last Friday, and talks about free grant money and loan forgiveness if you take a loan out with the SBA and you use the next 8 weeks to pay what they're considering necessary expenses, and that's payroll, health insurance, rent, mortgage expenses, and anything you need to supply for the work. So you can take out a loan, get your money within 3 days from the SBA. You can have up to $10,000 of that just be a grant-free money. And you can also, with the extension of that grant, apply for a loan. And if you use that, whatever amount you use on the next 8 weeks, that loan will be forgiven if it's on approved expenses. And all of that's outlined on the blog post. Like I said, you're going to get these slides on there for it. And then when you're thinking about the possibilities and the questions, next thing you need to look at is, how can you right now help your staff, help your clients, help your vendors, help your community with the changes that are going on? I mean, the only way we get through anything and get to tomorrow is together. So this is also a point for you to look at your spheres of influence, your staff, your company, your community, and see what changes you can make in there. Do you have extra supplies that are in the office that, maybe could be donated somewhere right now? Or do you have, extra computer equipment somewhere that could be sent to home with your staff to help them get set up? So just different things to look at. Jen, do you want to kind of talk about the difference between having a remote application that you can access versus a remote desktop that you dial into?
Yeah, sure. So what you need to kind of think of when you're moving through this and kind of looking at what your options are, you want to take a look and make sure that not only is your employees having the bandwidth to actually support this, but making sure that the programs can function on the devices that they have. And like Kelly mentioned, whether that's you send them home with the device or they're working through it on their actual computers themselves. So if they have a remote desktop, they're actually logging back into your connection in your office. So that would work well as long as you still have electricity in your office. You still have that connection availability. They can still get in there. Remote desktop would be an option, but that also has a lot of limitations to it too. I know around here in the middle of all this, we've got a lot of contractors that are laying lines for Google Fiber, which is great, but the problem is they keep cutting everybody else's internet lines. So if you happen to be in this area, they take down your lines, your employees can't get in. So remote desktop is a good temporary solution, but you might want to look at more towards a remote application because a lot of that stuff will work on a cloud. It can run from any kind of computer, and as long as they have an internet connection, they can connect back into it, and then they're sharing everything from one space. So that actually works for more of a long-term solution. The remote application might be a better one. And again, most of those cost money, so you kind of have to look into what each one offers and how that actually works for your office and what you're trying to get out of it. So what devices can connect to a company resources? So do you have any firewalls in place? Think about what your limitations are. Do you have to worry about client confidentiality? Are you worried about what's coming in? Do you have people that aren't necessarily tech savvy that may have viruses on their computers and stuff? So you need to kind of think about what kind of limitations that you want to put in place if you're going to allow somebody to connect back in. And that kind of goes into your safeguards as well. So look at your firewalls, look at your limitations, look at what can be causing some problems, and this is where you might want to get some kind of a consultant or an IT person involved and just kind of say, look, this is what we're thinking. What are going to be our pitfalls? What are going to be some obstacles that we need to consider?
And the very bare minimum of that, any device, any computer that's going to be contacting people from the office or touching documents or touching firm data needs to have an antivirus on it, needs to have a malware on that. That's bare minimum. And that needs to be audited where people sign off and say, yep, I've got that. Or someone goes in and makes sure that they see it on that computer and that it's turned on.
Yep. When you're talking about client social security numbers and some different information like that, someone can get into it and they wouldn't even know their computer is infected. So it's very important to make sure that you're not only keeping your employees safe, but you're keeping your clients safe as well. So yeah, and then you kind of look at some general solutions, your communication with your staff and your communication with clients. How is that being done? What is the best way to do that? And try and get that set up ahead of time so that way when you're ready to, if you have to close the office or you have to do something like this, you're not scrambling at the last minute. Kind of get those plans in place. Activity reports with staff. Make sure your staff knows what needs to be done, what's on our docket headlines. I know down here all of our courts are currently closed, and they're closed until the foreseeable future. So a lot of the firms have had to go, okay, what else can we do to bring money in because we can't touch these cases now? So you kind of look at what you can work with and find out what those deadlines are. Your document storage and document collaboration. How are things being stored? Do people have access to everything? So if one person changes it, can everybody see those changes and they're not redoing this work again and again?
And Teams can help with that. If you've got the
Yep.
full version, you can start putting stuff in Teams. Everyone can find it. They'll know where the most recent version of documents are.
Yeah, and then that goes along with your calendaring. Does everybody have access to the same calendar, and can they see what you're doing? Who's in meetings and who's talking to who? Making sure all of those calendars are shareable and everybody has access to that. When you're doing your matters and your projects is, again, can they see what's going on? Can they make sure that this has already been done? Do you have a checklist of sorts? Is there a way to kind of collaborate and say, okay, this has been done, this is what the next step is? Kind of working with timelines on that. In your time and expense recording, make sure that this stuff is getting documented. Every time an employee does something, make sure that that turns around, because this is how you're going to get your income. This is how you're going to be getting money coming in at this point. And how are you're collecting and you're depositing payments? Is this something that you're doing through credit cards? Is this something you're doing online, so you're not having to have communication or actual talking back and forth or meeting with clients? Can they do it with a credit card, so then you can electronically transfer it to your bank? You're not having to worry about going to the bank or talking with clients. And then you also have that ability to pay your bills, making sure that that's set up. You know what's going to be coming in and how to get the money back out.
Yep, got to keep the engine going if we're going to make it out of this.
Yeah.
So this is actually our last slide. It's perfect because we've only got a couple more minutes from it. But what you want to do is you want to start setting a policy. And this policy should be documented. And we do give you some templates. Again, you're going to get the slides. You're going to get the templates that are on there. But basically what you're looking at is you want to, for all your remote policy for it, right here in the middle, we want a communication policy. We want a remote work policy for the temporary time being, and remote work policy for long term. Again, I don't expect that we're going to be the same where everyone is just going to happily go back into work. No problems. This is going to be a lasting change, and we should be able to embrace that and plan for it. And then you may right now need to be implementing a flexible schedule policy for your workers, because maybe somebody has 5 children at home that they suddenly have to homeschool for. So they need to have 2 hours on, 2 hours off, or anything else. By having a formal policy for that, you're going to be able to share that with people so that you know what the expectations are. And when you present these policies, after you get it down, my recommendations are you have an all-hands meeting to discuss whatever policy. You don't tackle all 3 at once. You pick one and say, all right, this is what we're thinking. Anybody got, any huge parameters or anything else with this for it? And you want to have, brief discussion, mostly presenting, but something where you can take feedback. Airbnb is losing about 50% of their business right now because they made a policy that only took in the guests' point of view, not their business partners, and basically said guests could cancel anything at any time, no worries. Well, the partners are now leaving Airbnb because they were never consulted about that change of policy. So make sure they don't get the world, they don't get insight into absolutely everything, but make sure you tell them some of the things you're thinking about. Like, hey, no one is expected to reply to an email after hours. But if you get a text message at 8 o'clock, assume that that's pretty, important. Someone's bleeding, someone's in the hospital or something from that, and set those up. Then have an all-hands meeting to present after you've taken the feedback and adjusted it and say, hey, these are the policies. Then you want to have training. When you're setting a policy in and you're having an expectation of what somebody needs to do, you need to provide them with the tools for success and the measure of how they know they're doing it right. How are we going to check on this? Then have the documentation easily available. Get that information up there and share with it. And then any update or changes. Hey guys, we're changing from the temporary remote policies to the long term. That's another all hands meeting to discuss, all hands meeting to present, and then a Teams meeting to train on it. That way you're going to get buy-in from your staff, because if somebody is not where you can hover over their shoulder and see what they're doing, enforcement is hard. So you've got to get that buy-in, and one of the key ways of getting buy-in is making somebody feel like they were part of the process. So that's our high level on the action parts on that. Like I said, you'll be getting this plus 3 other documents on there. All right, well, thank you guys so much. We would love it if you guys, with or without mics, join us for the rest of the week. We will be taking questions like this, anything that's coming up. If you get into your remote plan, you're not sure if it looks good, and you want to join us tomorrow or Thursday and say, hey, I'm not sure if this sounds good, or I'm not sure what to do about this, or I'm not sure how. That's what we're here for. Jen and I are trying to make ourselves available to help people with this change over the next 2 weeks. And then afterwards, we may be having this once or twice a month in the future, just again to kind of keep this community and the open door policy up. It's changed for all of us. We'll see where we land.